Okay, so today I'm going to show you guys how to shoot and edit for the skies. The footage that you're watching is from a shoot, and I'll be showing you guys how I edit different photos from that shoot in order to get a look where the sky pops. Now, there's a couple of things that you have to keep in mind before you try and attempt this kind of a look. I think it's better in a lot of lighting situations when you're trying to get this look to actually use an external flash or something like that. And you'll see why later on in the video. When you are shooting for the skies, essentially what you're doing is you're trying to retain all those highlights in the skies so that you have that detail in your final photo. A lot of the times in some lighting situations, when you expose for your model's face, the sky in the background is going to get blown out because the sky is much brighter than your model's face. So what you can do to make sure that you have cool looking skies and you don't have to do like sky replacements in Photoshop or anything, you can get everything in camera. You just have to make sure you don't clip those highlights where the skies are. Now there's a couple of ways that you can shoot in order to do this. It's much easier to get a good image if you simply expose for the sky, so you let everything else get kind of dark in order to keep all the detail and color and everything in the sky, and then you simply light your model with some kind of light source. So it could be reflecting the actual sun, or it could be a flash like I'm using, whatever. Another way of going about this is to try and capture it all with natural light, but you have to be really careful, especially if you're using a DSLR and not mirrorless where you don't have a histogram, because what you need to do if you're shooting natural light and trying to get this look is to make sure that you are not clipping the highlights, so you have all that detail, but you're also not exposing too dark for your camera. And what I mean by that is, although cameras have really good dynamic range these days, especially if you're shooting on an APS-C sensor, if you push the shadow parts of the image too much, things can get really nasty and you can get unpleasant looking noise. So you really want to avoid exposing too dark, but at the same time, if you expose too bright, if you overexpose the sky, you won't be able to bring the detail back. So you have to find a good balance when you're shooting, especially if you're shooting natural light. Again, if you're using a flash, you can just expose for the sky. Everything else can be dark, and then you just use the light to light your model. So this is one of the reasons why, things like using external flashes and ND filters or high-speed sync, those things can come in super handy. So the next thing I'm gonna do, now that you guys know kind of how you need to shoot, is I'll show you how to edit and some information about the photos in Lightroom. Okay, so we are in Lightroom now, and this is a natural light shot where I'm shooting for the skies, and this is a shot where I used a strobe. So before we even get to editing, let's take a look at what happened in the pictures. So first of all, in this picture, so all the settings are the same for both of them. ISO 200, f2, you can see the settings here, and here I'm using a shutter speed of 1/3020th of a second, right? And I'm doing that so that I can keep a good amount of detail in the sky. But as you can see, my subject, my model, is very dark. Here I used an even faster shutter speed, 1/8000th of a second, and of course I'm using high speed sync here, and there haven't been any edits done yet, but already you're getting a better image. There's even more detail in the sky because I was able to use a faster shutter speed, but because I had a flash, I could also light my model. And when we take a look at the histograms, you can see the difference as well. So look at the histogram for this image. I think I did a pretty good job, all things considered, because on a DSLR you can't tell what you're gonna get beforehand. Here you can see these are all the highlights. This is where your sky is, all that stuff, right? And it's almost to the point where it's gonna clip. In fact, when you look at the image, you can see that some of the detail is being lost because everything up here is like just turning pure white. Okay, and it's not even in the highlights, it's all turning pure white. But because I knew the camera well enough, I knew, okay, I could still let it go past here and I'll be able to bring that information back. If it goes past here, like it's gone, like you can't even bring it back with any of these sliders, so you have to be very careful. And then the same thing with these shadows. If the shadows go and a lot of this information starts getting lost and it goes past this area here, you're gonna get crazy noise. It's just not gonna look good. So you have to be, when you're shooting a situation like this, natural light, you have to be super mindful and just super, like, kind of, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but like pretty good at exposing your image and knowing like what you can do. Because here you can see like I'm barely getting all the information in here, like barely. Then when you look at this, you can see nothing is clipping that far, and you can see that in the sky there's way more detail. Now there's still a lot of stuff in the shadows, but if you look at the histogram here, right, there's this complete valley right here. If I switch back to this other image, you see this little bump, and this is where like her skin is and stuff like that. That information is there where it's supposed to be, and then I can edit to make the picture look even better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by showing you guys how you might edit the natural light image. So the first thing I'm going to do just to get my colors together is drop one of my presets on there, just so I don't have to spend a lot of time doing stuff with the colors, and I'll just worry about showing you guys the exposure tricks. So I'm going to drop this preset on here. It's still really dark, but my preset does some things with the blues, so you already saw that I got a little bit more information back in the skies. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the highlight slider, bring it all the way down, and now my sky's back. Okay, so I'm gonna take my exposure up now that I see how much detail, and I'm gonna push it so I get, you know, just a little bit more light in there. Also that preset changed my white balance, so I'm gonna change that back so it doesn't look crazy. And now there's still enough detail in the sky that I'm okay with it. From pulling the highlight slider down, I brought my exposure up so the model looks a little bit less dark, and then I might push my shadows a little bit, right? But you can't push these too much because then it's just gonna look bad. It does like this terrible HDR thing. So I might bring it up to here, and then we have like a somewhat acceptable image. You could also like paint over this with a mask to make her a little bit brighter. Gonna filter. So of course, like you wouldn't really wanna do it this way. Well, let's invert the mask. Yeah. So then you could take a mask, put the mask over her like so. Of course, this is something you'd want to paint in, not just like put a radio mask over. So we did that, and now I can take the exposure up a little bit more, just a tad, just where the brush is. Yeah. And now that's, you know, of course I would do a whole lot more in editing, but that's pretty much like an okay looking shot now. You got a lot of detail in the sky. You can see the model. Yeah, and it looks okay, but you know, we had to boost the shadows, which a lot of times makes the skin look worse. And then I had to add on an extra filter to brighten her up a little bit, because I can't just boost the shadows and the blacks. Like if I boost the blacks, that's removing contrast, which I may not necessarily want. So you're having to make compromises when you shoot something like this, natural light. But the one benefit is the light looks completely natural. So if you want a look where the light looks completely natural, that works. When you use a strobe, a lot of times you can tell that there was a light used. I don't mind that. It makes it look really dramatic, more like interesting shadows on the face. But if you don't like that look, then you can still achieve this in natural light. You just have to be very careful about how you expose. And now when you look at the histogram, you can see all that information still there, and it's more towards like the central part of the image. Now let's move on to the shot with a strobe. So again, I'm just gonna drop one of my presets on, same preset, and what I'm gonna do is the same thing. I could take my exposure up, take my highlights way down, right? And now to get a similar look in the sky, I can raise my exposure. So let me compare this sky to this sky. So already, like, this image is pretty bright, and you're getting even more detail in the sky. So then here I can lift my shadows just a little bit, and then I might want to crush my blacks in this. So yeah, I can make this even brighter even, and still keep a lot of information in the sky. And here you can see in my histogram, nothing's clipping, everything is around the middle. Yeah, and I didn't have to do that much. I didn't have to use any filters. I didn't have to push my shadows as hard. In fact, I didn't have to do that at all. I could have left my shadows where they are. I just did that to soften them just a little bit. But when you do it too much, like I said, it could start to look crazy. Like that looks crazy. So I'm gonna undo that and just leave it alone. But here we have an image where the skin is exposed fine. The sky has a lot of detail, like actually even more detail than in the other image, but the subject is still pretty bright. And I can make some white balance changes because the skin looks kind of a little bit orangey. Yeah, now the sky looks even more blue. And then if I wanted to match the detail in the sky, well, she's getting a little bit too bright there, but yeah, this is probably fine. There's a lot of specular highlights because I didn't triple diffuse like I always do. So you're getting like highlights. And then that's one of the downsides of if you're using a strobe. Using something like a LED would make even softer light, so like a LED diffused might work a little bit better. But I was using a flash, so you're getting some more specular highlights, even though I diffused it. I don't know if I diffused once or twice for this, honestly. I can't remember. But yeah, so you can kind of see the difference between the natural light type of shot and the strobe type of shot. The strobe shot is a lot more dramatic because when you do the edit, a lot of the background gets to stay dark, and then you get these dramatic shadows, or you could have less dramatic shadows depending on how you decide to use the strobe. But you can achieve these dramatic shadows, this look, whereas natural light, you get this thing and it looks very natural, but you got to be very careful when you're exposing for this, and it depends on like your camera, how much you can really boost these shadows. There's a lot of variables where if you shoot with a strobe, you don't have to worry about it. So a lot of times I choose to shoot with a strobe, but you can get good images with the sky either way. Now that you guys know the different approaches that you can take, hopefully you're able to go out there and shoot for the skies. Alright, so now that we've gone through the basics, I'm actually going to give you guys another like little secret sauce tip that you can use sometimes. Now this isn't always like 100% sure. You have to like plan for this if you want to use this tactic. Another way you can get the sky to pop more is by messing with the actual saturation and luminance, so on and so forth, of the sky. Now, it becomes an issue if something else in the image is blue. If something else in the image is blue, you're going to have to start masking and doing a lot of work and, you know, stuff like that. I like to actually edit really fast. So if there's nothing else that's like a similar blue to the sky in the image, this works really well. You can still do this even if there's blue, but you know, you're going to have to mask stuff out and all of that. Luckily for me, because I knew I was shooting for the sky this day, there's no blue in the outfit or anything like that. I did have blue flowers in some of the other pictures, but the editing for the sky did change the flowers in like an unflattering or like not pleasing way, so I didn't mind it. But anyway, let's get to this tip. Okay, so what you can do is you can take the color picker, and we're going down to the HSL tab, or you know, section, and you want to take the color picker and you want to see if your sky is registering as aqua or blue or whatever. So a lot of this looks like aqua, right? So I can take the luminance, which is pretty much how bright a color is showing up for the aquas, and I can drag it down. Okay, now notice what that's doing. If I drag it down like an obscene amount, it's getting pretty dark in the sky and making things look extreme. So I can kind of darken that up. I can also, in this case, the blues aren't doing much, probably because my white balance is off. So I might have to do that. Yeah. So now if I do it and I edit the blues, yeah, see, I'm getting a little bit more darkness in the blues. So now this sky, like if I left these sliders alone, the sky looks like that, and I can make the sky look darker, right? But then you might think it looks kind of too dark, so then I could take this, make it a slightly brighter blue color, again by shifting it over to the teal. And then sometimes I'll take my teals and I'll shift it over to the blue so it's consistently blue, or you know, whatever, depending on what I want. I think I'll leave it alone like this. So now I have the luminance down, and I'll take the saturation of the blue up a little bit and saturate the aqua as well. And now we have like this super bright sky. If I didn't have those HSL adjustments, now HSL is doing some other things, but look at what that does to the sky just by editing the blue portions of the image. It does a lot. It does a lot. And you can see it too in the crystal ball here, like how the sky is getting reflected. Like that's another, you know, little tip that you can use. Again, this is gonna edit anything that's like aqua or blue, so you gotta be careful about that. You might have to do masking and stuff. You know, if there's other blue stuff in the image, you got to be careful, because as you can see when I edited for the sky here, the reflection of the sky, the edit happened here also. It's by color and not by area, so if you want to do it by area and color, then you have to mask and do all of that. But knowing that technique can be really powerful for editing your skies to just make them look crazy. Alright, thanks for watching that video, guys. Here you can see some of those blue flowers I was talking about earlier. If you like this, if you learned something, give it a thumbs up. If you have something to add to the conversation about getting great skies, very interesting looking skies, leave it in the comment section below so everyone can learn from what we know. If you have any questions, leave those in the comments below as well. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Check out my channel. I do a lot of different photography videos, cinematic videos, as well as music, things like that. You know, take a look around, and if you like what you see, be sure you guys subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Keep creating, keep making dope stuff. Yeah, that's it. See y'all.